was able to finish my law degree by the time I was 23 years old. Now, law school is obviously a big time commitment, so finding a way to shave it down can be pretty lucrative, and conventional wisdom says that between undergrad and law school, you're looking at something like 7 years of schooling. I was able to get that down to 5.5 years of schooling, and not because I'm insanely talented, but because I played my cards right. Here's how. Now, before you get to law school, you have to go through undergrad, and undergraduate programs are typically 4 years long. But before we even get to undergrad, let's briefly talk about high school, because there are some ways to accelerate your undergrad degree if you play your cards right in high school as well. One of the most effective ways to do that is through advanced placement tests, or AP tests for short. These are subject-specific tests that you can take to try and earn college credit for all of those undergraduate colleges that accept AP credits, which is just about all of them. If you get a high enough score on the test, you get college credit. There are a bunch of different subjects that you can take AP tests on, ranging from history, language, physics, and pretty much everything in between. And in my case, just through AP tests, I was actually able to acquire around a year's worth of credits when it came time for undergrad. So just by that alone, I was able to get out of a number of classes that I now didn't have to take. And another way to earn credit before you go to some undergraduate program is to actually take community college courses. Some high schools offer this, but you can also go directly to whatever your community college is and get some credits that way. It might be through summer courses or just finding ways to earn credit that can then be transferred by the time you get to whatever undergraduate program you're going for. But by the time you actually get to undergrad, you can still try to accelerate things from there. For one, you can continue taking summer courses, whether that's through the school, but also through community colleges to try and save some money there. Just make sure that the credits will transfer between the community college you're taking the class at and the actual undergraduate program you're attending. And depending on the undergraduate program, you might be able to take some sort of aptitude test to get out of classes that way. It's sort of similar to an AP test, only in this case, you wouldn't be in high school, you'd actually be admitted into the school, and you'd take the test there to try and get out of certain classes. Some schools do offer that, so it's worth exploring. And perhaps the most obvious way to accelerate your path to your undergraduate degree is to simply take more classes while you're in the program. Generally speaking, you're going to have some sort of minimum credit threshold to meet, so the faster you can get to that threshold, the quicker you can graduate potentially. But in the interest of keeping you there for longer, schools will typically put a cap on the amount of hours you can take. Sometimes schools will let you go over this cap for a variety of reasons. You typically have to request it specifically, but in any event, look for ways to add more classes to your schedule. Now, this is where you do have to be pretty careful because you don't want to overextend yourself, in which case you're doing poorly in all of your classes, because that's not going to really help for anything. And at the same time, if you're really trying to get something out of the program, you don't want to just take all blow-off classes, super easy classes where you can easily get an A and don't have to try at all or don't have to exert yourself in any way, in which case you're probably not learning anything. So what's really the point? But hey, I know there are a lot of people who are willing to spend 30 grand per year for a good time, but you're not one of those people with a life. You just want to dive straight into law school, get there as quickly as possible. But between these three methods, taking AP tests, going to community college courses over the summer, and then overloading my schedule, I was actually able to shave down a full year off of undergrad, and I was still able to get a double major and a minor because I had so many credits that I could work with. And I still enjoyed undergrad, I still had time for clubs, I met my wife while I was in school, and everything turned out fantastic. The thing about undergrad is you can be pretty flexible with it in most cases. You have a lot of flexibility over your schedule, you can find different ways to get more credit to apply to your existing degree, and you can accelerate it in many different ways. But what about law school? Now, when it comes to law school, things are quite a bit more rigid, especially in the first year of the degree. For full-time students, law school typically takes 3 years. For part-time students, it typically will take 4. Not every school offers a part-time program, though the one I went to did have a part-time program, and I actually started part-time during my first year. But in any event, in your first year, you're typically not going to have really any flexibility over your classes, at least for the vast majority of them. But at least after your first year is over, you can start taking summer courses, and just like undergrad, you can accelerate your program that way. Some schools, and this actually goes for undergrad as well, they'll have something called an intersession course, where they might have a special shortened session where you can take quicker classes, sort of condensed classes, to get some extra credit that way. I actually did this 3 times in law school, where I took a week-long class, and that gave me 2 or 3 credit hours to then be used towards the degree. So it was a really efficient way to get a bunch of credits in quickly, but of course I had to be available for that full week because it basically becomes a full-time job, literally 9 to 5 or something like that, just doing a class. But it can be a really efficient way to get some credits very quickly. But also, like undergrad, you can still try to overload your schedule in law school. Granted, it is quite a bit more difficult because often the classes are a lot more writing intensive, especially especially as you get towards finals time. All I'm really trying to say is it can be quite a bit easier to overextend yourself in law school compared to most undergrad programs, though it very much depends on the classes you're picking for either. And like undergrad, there are probably going to be some pretty hard limits on the amount of classes you can take, so don't expect to do a double class load or something crazy like that. You're maybe going to be able to add an extra class or two, and that could make a big difference when it comes to trying to accelerate the degree. By overloading my schedule after my first year, taking summer courses and doing some intersession courses, I was able to shave down my law degree down to 2.5 years of school time. Even though I did start part-time during my first year, so I was really on pace for a 4-year program, but I was still able to get it down under 3 years and actually got it down to 2.5. And I actually had a classmate who was able to graduate law school in 2 years, so I know that's possible as well. So I graduated law school at the end of the first semester of my 3rd year, and by graduating in December, I was able to take the bar exam in February, so I was able to move up my whole license process as well. I didn't have to wait till the July bar, which means between undergrad and law school, I was able to do it all in 5.5 years. But why would someone want to do such a thing? I do understand that a lot of people go to school to just have a great time, and that's all well and good. But for many other people, they try to go to school to usually increase their earning power or find some way to get a better job or a job that they want to do. And to that, time is money, especially when you have loans and you're paying interest on those loans while you wait to finish school. Every day that you're in class and not working is another day that you are losing out on potential income. And that's not to say that class isn't worth it, but it is a cost to keep in mind. It's the opportunity cost of going to school. And generally speaking, the quicker you can start earning, the quicker you can start making that degree financially worthwhile. With the 1.5 years or so in time saved, that's time that I don't have to spend in school, and instead is time that can be spent actually making a real income. And that's not to say that you can't work while you're in school. I did that while I was in law school, and I had a bunch of classmates who were doing the same, so you can certainly do that, but there still is a pretty big time cost in that you have to focus on school. It's taking up a lot of your free time, and if all goes well, you'll probably be making more once you finish the degree anyway. And not to mention, by shaving off time off of a degree, you're also saving tuition costs, assuming you don't have some sort of scholarship covering everything. And that likewise brings down the opportunity cost of going to school. But what about the drawbacks? Now, as with any decision you make, there are trade-offs. If you go to accelerate your degree, there's a chance you're missing out on some of the good stuff of school, of course. One of the biggest benefits of going to school in the first place is the network that you create and the people that you meet while you're in school. By shaving down the time you're in school, you have less time to meet some of those folks that you might have met otherwise if you were staying for the full schedule. But of course, you can still meet people outside of school. It's not as though school is the only place that you can make connections, but it's typically a very useful and easier way to make very quick connections with ideally people who are interested in the same thing as you. And also people who are interested in many different things, and those can be very useful connections as well. And I shouldn't forget to mention that you meet friends at school, and in many cases, very special friends. But one thing I will say about this networking point is, in many cases, it's very front-loaded in how you make your connections at whatever program you're at. Typically, you're going to make most of your connections in the first year or even first semester of your time at school. So there's a disproportionate benefit in the first year compared to the second, third, or even fourth year of whatever the program is. That's not a hard and fast rule by any means. You can still meet great connections after your first year that might, quote unquote, outweigh your initial connections you might have made in your first semester, but that's not really the point. But the point is you're typically meeting a lot of new people really quickly when you first start school, and that's typically where a lot of your connections are going to come from, whether it be more casual friends or more professional relationships. For me, during law school specifically, I met a bunch of great people during my first and into my second year, but then law school went virtual, and that made things a lot more awkward in trying to actually make new connections and new friends. It just was a lot harder and certainly a lot less pleasant. So that was a little bit of extra motivation to finish the degree that much quicker. And another drawback of accelerating your degree is simply that it can be very difficult and sometimes too difficult. But then again, you should be challenging yourself at least in some way while you're in school, and if you can get through those harder times, the better you'll be after them. But you obviously have to be careful not to completely overextend yourself, as it is a bit of a balancing act. So what can we learn? Well, accelerating your degree is definitely feasible and repeatable. But even if that's the case, it might not be easy, and you're going to have to weigh your options carefully to figure out whether it's actually worth it for you. It really depends on where you think your greatest opportunities are. If they're in school, then it makes sense to stay in school. If they're outside of school because you maybe have some job lined up, or you really want to get to a particular thing or the next level of school even, you might want to figure out a way to accelerate that degree. And in a worst case scenario, if you take a bunch of credits in an effort to try and accelerate your degree, but then you decide later later that you don't actually want to graduate early, well, you still have all those credits in the bank, so you can just take less classes in your final semesters and take your foot off the gas in that way. It can give you some serious flexibility later on. But anyways, that's how I was able to graduate early, though I know many people who were able to graduate even quicker. And if you have any questions, definitely let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. But otherwise, if you liked this video or found it informative, then definitely like it, since that would help the channel out a lot. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future videos, since I put out new videos every single week. But until next time, take care.